Welcome back to 710, and if you've been here for any amount of time at all, you know I love my Super Duties. Now, we are definitely graced with the presence of this brand new 22 King Ranch, and it's here for a couple upgrades, which I bet you can see in the back of it here. It's here for some new wheels and tires, and a 4-link lift kit. So, let's go ahead, get everything out of there, get it all unboxed, get this thing up on the hoist, and get to rocking. Let's go. Okay, so finally we were able to get everything out of the back of this truck, laid out here on the bench, and let's take a peek at what we got. So starting down here, we have the dual steering stabilizer, so that's all the brackets and the hardware that goes with that. Right here, we have the rear drive shaft spacer. Right here, we have the rear kit, which is just a taller block. Moving down, coil springs for the front. This is your drag link. This goes from the pitman arm all the way down to the knuckle. We have your 4 link arms here. So these 4 arms will be what goes from the bracket down to the front axle to hold the front axle in place. This bracket here and the next bracket right here behind it, these are the brackets that bolt in to hold these link arms. Moving down, this is your panhard bar bracket. So this drops the factory panhard bar. New pitman arm, miscellaneous hardware, sway bar drop. Again, some more hardware, which is the bushings here, the instructions, 2 steering stabilizers, and some shocks down here on the end. So we got a whole table full of stuff. Can't start putting any of that on until this stuff comes off. So real quick, let's take a peek at the wheels and tires going on this thing. Now, I do absolutely love these wheels, and we don't have anybody around here currently that's rocking them. So I'm pretty excited to see them on this thing when it's all said and done. What they are is a black Rhino wheel. Really cool looking wheel. They have these big bolts that come out of them. That's where we are going to be bolting to it. And yeah, they're just a great looking wheel. Now, these are 37-inch Toyo open countries. And yeah, I mean, how do you go wrong with those tires? Absolutely killer tires for on the street. Street driving, not a lot of road noise or anything. So I think it's gonna do absolutely perfectly for us on this build. Now, what do you say we get done with all this talking? We start ripping some wheels off, and we go from there. So what I usually do is crack the lug nuts here while it's on the ground. I leave all but, I take all but 2 off, so we have 2 on each tire holding them. We grab with the hoist, pick her up, and get rocking. All right, so if you've never tried to take some of these wheels off, best way to do it is pull the center cap first. And what it has here are these metal clips that snap onto the lug nut. So what you want to do is get a plastic interior tool, you know, pull your interior panels off or whatever. And it's got a couple of these little cutouts, as you can see right there. Put it behind there and just pop. It'll pop itself off of the lug nut. You can take this off, then you pull the lug nuts off real easy. You're not fighting with them or anything like that. So note to self, do that first, and then just rip the lug nuts off like usual. Pull the tires down, you're good to go. All right, so we're gonna do it without the instructions. So we're just gonna start ripping. I'm gonna explain here what I'm gonna do, then I'm gonna jump into doing it, and I'll bring you back when I'm done. So this right here is your drag link. It goes from the passenger side knuckle all the way up there, as you can see, to the pitman arm. So that bar is coming out and getting replaced. So we're gonna undo this nut down here. This whole thing will press up and through. That can come off. The steering stabilizer up here, this one bolt right here, goes over to it. That's gonna come off. These 2 bolts right here for the sway bar, those are coming down because we have that spacer plate. So we're gonna undo it here, we're gonna undo it there, take the sway bar right out. Once that's out, we're gonna go back through here. I'm gonna undo this nut on this side, and that really big nut right there above my finger. Those are coming out. Then we're gonna move over here to this bracket right here. That bracket's gotta come out for our new bracket. And then we're gonna jump over here to this side. We're gonna undo the 2 sway bar bolts here, the sway bar end link here, get that out of the way. Last but not least, we're gonna go and pull these shocks. 1 bolt here and 1 nut up there. Shocks will come out, and then we're about ready to lower this axle. So I'm going to leave this nut right here and the 2 on the front here, just so that the axle can't fall. But we're gonna actually lower the axle down roughly to where we think we're gonna be. Then we're gonna undo those. We're gonna pull this radius arm out, and we'll start going on that. So that's kind of what we're doing. I'll keep moving the camera around and I'll voice over if anything changes, but now you know kind of what we're doing. Let's get to it. I know it's kind of tight up here. I do have my stands in the front, so I'll try and move the camera around and get a good place for you, but yeah, that's what it's gonna be. All right, so we're coming over here. We're getting this with a 30 mil wrench. Then we're gonna go and get this bolt, and there's 3 more just up on top up here. So that's going to remove the factory track bar and the bracket. We're gonna reuse the bar, not the bracket, so that's gonna come off and get gone. That's gonna also give us room up to this nut up here that I'm pointing at, so we can get this factory pitman arm out of here, and we can get that swapped, put the new bracket in. Let's do it. Alright, so as you saw, we got the bracket out of the way now and the factory track bar that used to go down here. Now we have access to the nut here for the pitman arm. So what we want to do is crack this loose, put our puller on here, and we can pull this thing downward, and then that'll disconnect this factory pitman arm. We can put the new pitman arm, and then we're about ready to pop the shocks and our radius arms. Lower this thing down, we'll be able to pull the coil spring out, swap the bracket here. Our bracket bolts into these 2 bolts, and then it comes up, and then we have 2 bars now that are going to come down to this location here and the one up top. So we're getting there. We're I don't know, over halfway pulling stuff off of the front end. So once we get everything off, then we can take a second and start figuring out what goes back on. All right, so let's look underneath here. Trying to pull the factory pitman arm off. You put your puller up here where my fingers are. It pushes on the end of the shaft and pulls that thing down. Well, of course, mine stripped the center bolt out or whatever. So I looked around for my other one. Obviously, I can't find it. So I welded a nut to the backside so I can just use a normal bolt. Put that in there, and then I broke the end of the little finger that goes up on top there. I snapped it off. So we are not getting the pitman arm off tonight, and because I got upset doing that, I decided I'm gonna go ahead and pull the coil spring that used to sit here and the shock that used to sit behind it. I put my transmission jack here underneath the axle to hold it. So now that we have that stuff out of the way, we're ready to pull the radius arm off. So we're gonna pull one side off. We'll put the new stuff on. We're gonna pull the other side off, put the new stuff on over there. And then we'll put a new coil spring in, we'll put a new shock in, and that'll get the front end roughly sitting where it needs to be. Now, because I can't get that pitman arm off, I can't reinstall the track bar bracket because that goes right over top of there like I mentioned before. And that means I can't do much more on the front end. But if I can get the arms in, the axle in place, the coils and all that kind of stuff, I can get the sway bar lowering brackets on there, then I can move to the back end and start rocking on the back end. And it is what it is. I gotta go get a new puller tomorrow. So anyways, that's where we're at. That's what we're doing. Let's pull a radius arm. All right, so let's spin around now. We need to pull this factory bump stop right here out. So the best way to do is stick your screwdriver up, kind of prying down this way. You can get up around the top and then pull up like that, and you'll see that it just kind of pops. It's hard to do with one hand, but just kind of pops. There you go. So there is a little extension that we're gonna put on, and we're gonna put this back in. Let me go grab it and I'll show you how to do it. All right, so went in, got some sleep, came back out, and I feel a lot better today. Now, what we did is came back out today, and the only thing I've done so far is flip the wiring harness. There's a wiring harness right here on the driver's side that used to come down and through this pocket, but now we need that open for the new brackets. So I have a transmission jack under here that's going to hold the transmission mount. We're gonna undo these two bolts, 1, 2, and with those out of the way, we can get this side bracket on and start getting some arms on this thing. So, enough chatting, let's get rocking and yeah, do stuff. All right, so like I mentioned, we have the blocks here holding the transmission mount up. And I need to take out these two bolts, one here and one here. After I'm done that, I can slip our new 4-link bracket up inside this bracket. It fills this gap here, and then it goes all the way around the back, and we're gonna put new hardware through where these two bolts are. As soon as that's complete, we need to come in here. We're gonna drill a hole that we can put a capture nut through, and we can thread a bolt up into there. So, first things first, let's grab the impact. We'll pull those transmission crossmember bolts out. We'll slide the new hardware in there so we can get that hole drilled, all right? Make sure if you're gonna be doing this, you gotta drill that one hole right here. You go through and touch it up with some paint. This here is roll bar paint. It's got some ceramic in it. So yeah, it's what I usually use. It's nice and flat, kind of like the frame rail itself. So when he washes it, it'll look nice. And it's kind of hard to chip off because it's made to climb over for a cage every day. So that's what I use. Make sure you touch up your holes, or if not, you're gonna have rust popping through in no time, and your install is gonna look like garbage. All right, so we got the holes drilled. We got some spray paint on them. That's drying right now. So what I like to do is come on over and start assembling our arms. Now, as you can see here, we have a large hole. You can fit, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 fingers in there. And there's a small threaded hole right here on the top. So we come over here, grab our bushing. And if you notice, the bushing has 4 of these little divots. So you want to line one of those divots up with that grease zerk, and then we'll put one in the other side on both of these, and then we're going to press in the center sleeve. So what I do is put it in the vise. You just kind of collapse the vise down. That'll shove this guy right through the middle. And then last but not least, we want to install the grease zerk, and you want it pointed down that arm in both of them. So that'll point toward the front of the vehicle. Whenever you want to grease it, you can just pop, pop, and you're done. All right, let's get this sucker going. All right, so now we're getting to the fun part. So what we do now is we use this front hole here for the shorter of our arm. That's gonna come all the way forward to the top bushing, which is right behind my finger. And then we're gonna use the longer one that goes from there all the way down here, and that goes to that bushing there. Now, the lower one does have these little plates right here, and this is your alignment. So usually what I do is I just stick them straight up. That's kind of your middle setting. You can go this way and that puts it to the front, this way and it puts it to the back. So usually what I do when I set these things up is put them in the middle. That'll get us close to be able to drive it to the alignment shop and get that done. And then, yeah, you just want to slide the bolts in here. None of the bolts in the brackets or these will be tightened at this point. So I don't even put nuts on them. I just slip them into place. That'll hold them there, kind of get the axle where we want it. And we're off to the races. So let's slide the sucker in. All right, so moving right along. Now we're gonna go back and tighten just this back bolt that holds this bracket to the factory. We're gonna tighten this one that we drilled through and the two that come through the transmission cross member. So we start off with the transmission cross member ones. Those go to 50 foot-pounds. We move to this outside one that we drilled. That goes to 90 foot-pounds. And then we go lastly to this big guy right here, and that goes to 150. Now, you do not want to tighten the two bolts here for the control arms, the 4-link bars. The reason is you want weight on this vehicle when you do tighten those. If not, you're gonna have to, when the weight goes on it, it's gonna pull that bushing around and it'll cause premature wear. So you don't want to tighten anything in the front, you don't want to tighten anything at the back. All you want to do is tighten the brackets down so that we can get some weight on this vehicle and we know that it's not going to come apart. Anyways, let's go and jump to do that. 50, 90, 150 is what we're after. Easy as that. So these ones are all torqued. We're gonna go to the other side and do the same thing over there. Now we're about ready to install coil springs. So we're moving right along, and now because we don't have the Fox shocks for the front of this thing, we need to grind this front corner right here off. So what we're gonna do is start from here, kind of grind down on a little 45. Let me see, there you go. So we're gonna grind just this little 45 off right here. This back side's all beveled, you don't have to do anything, but this front side here, you definitely have to. So, we're gonna grab grinder, cut her off, and then paint it up, put a shock in. Okay, so underneath the truck here, we have the new pitman arm installed, and make sure that you torque this nut here to 350 foot-pounds. Now, if you don't have a massive torque wrench, and I mean like, I think mine's past my hips. Here, I'll show you. Oh. So yeah, this thing comes up to here on me. I'm 6'2", so if you don't have a 4-foot long torque wrench, you're not torquing that thing down. Make sure you get that thing that tight. I've had guys before try to do this themselves and they torque it to 150 figuring that's good enough. It's not, trust me. So get a big torque wrench, go borrow one, whatever you got to do. Make sure you get that thing tight. As you saw on there, plenty of red Loctite. We don't want that thing coming off, obviously. So now with that in place, we can get the third to last bracket for the front end here installed. And the bracket that I'm talking about is this massive one here. This is the new track bar drop bracket. So this goes under that pitman arm nut. So that's got to be installed first. So we're gonna get this thing in place. We're gonna get the bushing here pressed into this adjustable track bar that he bought with the kit. So we need to put a bushing in down there, and then this thing's ready to slide in. We can make some adjustments to get the axle center in the vehicle, and we're about ready to put on the dual steering stabilizer and put this sucker on the ground, at least in the front. So let's get rocking. Okay, so next step that I always like to do at this point, now that the front end is pretty much located with all the link bars and we have the track arm or track bar bracket in, now I like to go ahead and do the sway bar brackets. Now, this came from BDS. The way that this is sitting, as you can see, it's kind of all chunked up and gross. So it actually is not too bad for how we need it. This is the surface that's going to mount, and that's kind of how it's going to sit in the vehicle. So what we're going to do is kind of loosely put it in place. Then we're going to go ahead and spray paint it again with the paint so that this guy doesn't have a brand new truck with crappy old brackets. So let's go ahead, get this thing kind of set up in place. We'll spray it, and then we'll move on to the next step. So last thing to do under this front end is the dual steering stabilizer. Now, they take the bracket, these little fingers here, hit the middle casting. This would be the driver's side over here. And they want a 1/4 inch spacer, or a 1/4 inch space between the bottom of the bracket and the tie rod. So I just grabbed a piece of 1/4 inch flat stock that I had. We'll real quick snug these guys up, 40 foot-pounds each there. And we can start installing the other brackets down further for the other end of the shop. Alright, so now that we got the center bracket in, we need to put the outside bracket, which is this little guy. So they sit out here on the outer tie rod end, and what they do is they U-bolt around the bottom here, and you just put your nuts up on the top. Now, you put these in a spot, sometimes there's a little bit of flashing, but you put those in a spot, you measure from the center of this hole all the way over to the center of this hole, and you want 20 1/8 inches. If you have 20 1/8 inches, you go ahead and tighten it down, and then you're ready to put the shocks on. So it's pretty self-explanatory. I'll bring you back when we throw the shocks up in it. All right, so like I said, pretty self-explanatory. You got a bolt out here that goes to the shock. You got a bolt right here, bolt here, and a bolt there. That's about it. So steering stabilizers are on and done. Next thing to do is put the front wheels on. We'll set the front end on the ground, and then we're gonna go to the back and do the back blocks. Okie dokie, so front is just about done now. All we have to do is get the truck sitting level. Then we're gonna turn the steering wheel left and right, and that's gonna pull the track bar over so we can slide the shims in. Once the shims are in place, we can snug that up. That should get us pretty close to having the axle centered in the vehicle. At that point, we're gonna wanna go ahead and torque down the control arms going to the front axle. The one nut that's left on the panhard bar, which is at the frame side where those little plates are, and then we can turn around and that is finished up there completely. Now, we're on to the back. The back is pretty simple. So we have new U-bolts right here on the ground. We have new lift blocks there. We have a drive shaft spacer, which just goes in with 4 bolts, and we have a couple new shocks. So what we need to do first is pull the bushings out of the bag, get them pressed into the shocks here, and hey, the shocks are ready to go. That means all of the parts that have to go on it are underneath there with us. The only thing left to do is pull that stock stuff out. All right, so first up, we're gonna pull the lower shock bolts, the upper shock bolts right up here, get those right out of the way. Then we're gonna move on to the U-bolts here. Lower shock bolt, upper shock bolt, and U-bolts. So let's throw 2 time lapse, get her done. Next step is pulling the U-bolts off, taking the factory block out, putting our new block in. Make sure if you're doing the block, the small side of the block is toward the front and the little wing is on the inside of the frame so it can hit your bump stop if you overload. late night, but I believe we are totally complete. So what we're gonna do now is, I usually I do not put grease in any of the, you know, the little grease zerks or anything until the very end. That's the last thing that I do. That tells me that everything is complete. So we're gonna take a flashlight, we're gonna go underneath, we're gonna make sure that every nut and bolt is torqued, which has our little paint marker lines on them. If every single nut and bolt is torqued, we already verified the steering by going forward and backward in the shop 10 or 15 times, so we know that we're pretty close or close enough to get to alignment. Lug nuts are on, everything's on, so we should be good. Again, we're just gonna nut and bolt everything, make sure it's good. If it's good, a little bit of grease, we're going for a test drive. So I will save you guys all the boring stuff. We are going to nut and bolt it, and then hopefully next thing you see is this thing rolling out of the shop.